Long before the bridges and loud horns came to Onitsha, the market by the Niger River was already the heart of life. The smell of roasted fish, yam, and red palm oil hung in the air. Traders called to each other across the rows of baskets, and goats bleated as they were dragged through the crowd. Every morning, the river shimmered like a bowl of melted bronze, carrying canoes filled with goods from faraway towns. Chief Ease was known as the King of Yams. He had the biggest yam barns in all of Onitsha. When he walked through the market, people made way. His wrappers were clean, his beads bright, and his walking stick always touched the ground twice before he spoke. Some said he could tell the quality of a yam just by smelling it. But more than his wealth, people admired his only child, Nneka. Nneka was not like most girls her age. She could lift small yam baskets herself, argue with traders, and still find time to laugh with the children by the river. Her mother had died when she was young, so she grew up following her father everywhere. Chief Ease often said, "Nneka is the breath in my chest. When I am gone, she will carry my name." But in every market, envy hides between smiles. Among the traders were two brothers, Okoro and Ugo. They sold dried fish and smoked bushmeat, but they were known more for their greed than their trade. They borrowed money, cheated customers, and quarreled with anyone who crossed them. When Chief Ease once refused to lend them more money after they wasted his last loan, something dark settled in their hearts. It was during the Yam festival that trouble began. The market was loud with drums and laughter. People praised Chief Ease for his generous donations. He had given baskets of yams to widows and strangers. Nneka danced that night, her feet moving like water, her laughter carrying through the crowd. Okoro and Ugo stood at a distance, their eyes following her. "That man's pride will choke him one day," Okoro muttered. "And when it does, we will be ready to collect what falls," Ugo replied. That night, under the bright moon, they followed Nneka as she carried empty baskets to the river. She often fetched water after the festivals, when the crowd had gone and the river was quiet. They watched her kneel, her wrapper tied tight around her waist, her reflection rippling in the silver water. Okoro whispered, "Now." They stepped out of the shadows. Nneka heard the rustle of leaves, turned, and froze. Before she could scream, a rough hand covered her mouth. She kicked, twisted, and tried to bite, but Ugo's grip was strong. They tied her wrists with palm rope and dragged her toward the path leading to the caves, a place people avoided after dark. The caves sat by the river's bend, hidden behind tall grass and old trees. The villagers said it was home to spirits and bats, thousands of them, that only came out at night to hunt insects. But Okoro and Ugo didn't believe in such things. They thought fear was a story told to keep children close to home. Inside the cave, the air was damp and heavy. Nneka could hear the squeaks of bats high above. Okoro lit a small fire and laughed. "Tomorrow, we send a message to her father. He will pay in yams and gold. If he refuses, well," he made a cutting motion across his neck. Nneka's heart raced, but she stayed quiet. Crying would not help her here. Instead, she looked around. The bats shifted on the ceiling, their eyes glowing like beads in the firelight. Her grandmother once told her a story, that the spirits of the night listened to old songs if sung with a brave heart. She waited until the brothers began to argue about who would get more of the ransom. Their greed was louder than their sense. Then, softly, she began to hum. At first, it was only a whisper. A tune her grandmother used to sing while pounding yam at dusk. Her voice was low, trembling, but steady. Okoro frowned. "What is she doing?" "Let her sing," Ugo said, chuckling. "It will be her last song." But the bats began to stir. One or two dropped from the ceiling, flapping around the fire. Then 10 more. Then hundreds. The brothers shouted, waving their arms, but it was too late. The air exploded with wings. The bats screamed and dove, attacking everything that moved. The fire scattered, smoke filled the cave, and Nneka used the chaos to cut the rope on a sharp stone. She crawled toward the cave's mouth, her heart hammering. Behind her, Okoro screamed as bats tangled in his hair. Ugo tried to run, but slipped on the wet rocks. Nneka burst into the open night and ran toward the sound of drums far away, the village still celebrating. Nneka ran barefoot through the forest. The moon lit the path, but the roots and stones tore at her feet. She didn't stop. Behind her, she could still hear faint echoes of the brothers shouting and the wild fluttering of bats. She didn't look back. The forest near the Niger was deep and tangled, filled with night noises, frogs croaking, insects singing, distant howls. Every rustle made her heart jump, but she kept going, whispering to herself, "I will see the sunrise. I will see my father again." After what felt like hours, she reached the outskirts of the village. Her legs trembled, her hair was full of leaves, and her wrapper was torn. A group of men sat by a fire near the yam barns, hunters who had stayed behind to guard the market goods. When they saw her stumbling out of the bush, they jumped to their feet. "It's Chief E's daughter," one of them cried. They ran to her, holding her up gently. Her voice shook as she spoke. "They took me, Okoro and Ugo, by the river. They are hiding in the cave." The hunters looked at one another. Okoro and Ugo were known troublemakers, but kidnapping the daughter of Chief E's? That was madness. Without wasting a moment, the leader of the hunters, a broad man named Obi, grabbed his spear. "Show us the way," he said. But Nneka's legs were weak. She couldn't go back. "Follow the river bend," she said. "You will hear the bats." The men exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone in Onitsha had heard stories about that cave. No one went there after dark. But hearing the fear in her voice, they knew they had no choice. The hunters moved quickly, torches in hand, spears ready. The night wind carried the river's smell, cool and heavy. When they reached the bend, they heard it before they saw it, a strange, high-pitched noise, like thousands of tiny cries. The bats were still circling above the cave, flying in wild patterns against the moon. The hunters stopped, raising their torches. "Spirit save us," one whispered. Obi stepped forward. "No spirit here, only men who think themselves clever." He motioned for two others to follow him. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and wings. They covered their faces with cloths and stepped carefully. Then they saw them, Okoro and Ugo, huddled near the wall, covered in scratches and guano. Their eyes were wide, their bodies shaking. When the torchlight hit them, they screamed and tried to crawl away. "Please!" Ugo cried. "Don't let them come again." "Who?" Obi asked. "The bats. The spirits she called." Okoro tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. The hunters grabbed them, tied their hands, and dragged them out. The bats followed, swirling around their heads before disappearing into the trees. When they returned to the village, the people gathered. Torches lit the night like stars on earth. Chief Ease stood at the center, his wrapper hanging loose, his face tight with worry. When he saw Nneka safe, he rushed forward and held her. "My child," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What did they do to you?" She shook her head. "Nothing, Papa. The bats saved me." The crowd gasped as the hunters threw Okoro and Ugo to the ground. Their faces were pale, their clothes torn. "These are the men," Obi said. "They tried to sell your daughter for gold." By morning, the whole market knew the story. People gathered under the big Udala tree where the elders held council. Chief Ease sat with them, his face heavy with anger and shame, not for himself, but for the evil that had grown among his people. Okoro and Ugo knelt before the council, their heads bowed. "Why?" Chief Ease asked, his voice low. "Did I not feed you when you were hungry? Did I not help your mother bury your father?" Okoro tried to speak. "Chief, it was greed. The devil entered our hearts." "The devil," one of the elders snapped. "You opened the door for him." Another elder, an old woman with a white head wrap, stood up slowly. "The girl called the bats," she said. "That is no small thing." The ancestors heard her voice. This was not just crime, it was a curse upon your own blood. The crowd murmured in agreement. In those days, the punishment for kidnapping was severe. The council decided that Okoro and Ugo would be banished from Onitsha. Their property would be seized, their names spoken no more in the market. Before they left, they were made to sweep the marketplace from end to end, a symbol of cleansing, while everyone watched. When they were done, Chief Ease stood. "Let their greed be swept away with the dust of this market," he said. Let every child remember that no wealth comes from wickedness. The brothers were sent across the river that evening, their canoe pushed into the current with no oars. No one ever saw them again. Some said they drowned. Others said they wandered far north, living as beggars. Days later, the market returned to life. Drums played again, traders called out their prices, and the smell of roasted yam returned to the air. But something had changed. People spoke softly when Nneka passed. Children whispered, "That is the girl who sang to the bats." Chief Ease built a small shrine by the river in honor of the ancestors who had protected her. He placed a carved wooden bat at the top, its wings spread wide. Every year after that, during the Yam festival, Nneka would go to the river and lay flowers there. She never sang the song again, but sometimes, when the moon was bright, bats would circle above her head, quietly, like they remembered. Time moved like the river, slow but steady. Nneka grew into a woman, wise and strong. She took over her father's yam trade and expanded it beyond Onitsha. Traders came from across the Niger to buy from her, calling her Ada G. Akwu, daughter of the great Yam. But she never forgot that night.